I was told to begin at the start, though the start feels uncertain now. Memory has a weight to it, like lead pressed against the skull end, yet there are pieces that slip through, fragments that seem rearranged whenever I close my eyes. You want the mission? Fine. Lebanon. Winter. 1983. Coordinates etched into my briefing file like a scar. 3406 N, 3539 IA remote sector outside Zahal, wrapped in snow and silence. We were to infiltrate a black site facility said to be CIA-controlled. At the time, the region was crawling with rival factions, but this compound existed outside all maps, outside jurisdiction. We were told only fragments, that the Americans had been holding a strategic prisoner. No name, no nationality, no face. Only that the subject had been confined in near total isolation and that intelligence leaks threatened exposure. Our task: enter quietly, assess containment, and if necessary, assist with transfer operations. That was the language used, transfer operations. But even in the sterile phrasing of the briefing, there was hesitation. I noticed it in the colonel's throat clearing, the way his eyes never lingered on the word prisoner. I'd spent enough years reading men, reading lies, to know something in that building wasn't meant to be seen. Still, at the time, my thoughts were clinical, precise, like a sharpened blade. I checked my gear twice: silenced Beretta, standard kit, cold weather fatigues. Radio encrypted to Mossad frequency only. My team seasoned operatives all waited in silence. It's the kind of silence that comes from professionals who've killed in shadow and who know too much about the things governments bury. The night before insertion, I could not sleep. It's not because of fear, not then. It was something else. A vibration in the walls of the safe house, faint but constant, like a hum at the edge of hearing. I asked my comrade if he heard it. We said no. At 0300 hours, we moved. Snowfall smothered our tracks. I remember the way the pine branches bent under their weight, cracking faintly like bones. I remember the air tasting metallic strange for that altitude, as though lightning had struck nearby. I also remember, though this is where memory falters, that in the tree line outside the compound fence, something whispered my name. I had not told anyone there my real name, Lebanon, 1983. The region was already a crucible of blood and proxy war Syrians on one side, phalangists and militias on the other, Israelis watching every road, and the Americans quietly pulling strings. In that chaos, the existence of a CIA prison should have been impossible, yet it stood. Satellite imagery had captured only faint outlines, concrete slabs, antenna arrays, and an access road that disappeared beneath a hillside. No official maps marked it, no faction laid claim, which made it more dangerous than anything else in the valley. Our orders were simple on paper: confirm containment of Subject 7, assess structural integrity of facility, provide silent extraction route if American security failed. But every Mossad briefing officer carried the same look and unease, too carefully hidden. They didn't call the detainee by name or even by code, just the prisoner, that choice of words. I'd learned long ago that when intelligence agencies avoid identifiers, it's not out of ignorance, it's out of fear. The stakes extended beyond politics. Colonel's phrasing still burns in my mind. If containment fails, it will not matter whose borders we cross. What is locked beneath Zahal must remain there, or none of this will hold. None of this. He didn't mean the war, or the occupation, or the fragile peace conferences in Geneva. He meant something larger, something that made borders, weapons, even nations irrelevant. That was the first time I felt the tremor of unease. Not fear, not yet, but the sense of being a pawn on a board too vast for human eyes. Still, we were professionals. Mossad does not operate on superstition. Steel, firepower, intelligence, that is what keeps us alive. Whatever was locked in that prison, whatever the Americans feared, it was flesh and bone. Flesh and bone can be broken. That is what I told myself, as I signed the clearance forms in ink that bled across the page like a spreading wound. We were 5 that night, not counting myself. 5 professionals who had bled in shadows, each carrying skills sharpened to a lethal edge. On paper, we were nothing more than a liaison unit. In truth, we were an expendable cell sent to step where even Americans hesitated. 1. Commander I Tanhawk Maram rank. Major IDF detached to Mossad. age 42. He was the kind of man whose stare could silence a room before his mouth ever opened. Career soldier, calm to the point of severity, always chewing gum as if rhythm alone kept him balanced. I had seen him walk through sniper fire without a tremor, yet in private, he carried a photograph of his daughter tucked inside his map case. He never spoke of her, but on long nights, he would glance at the photo like a compass. Itin was logic incarnate, discipline made flesh. If something shook him, I knew we were already lost. 2. Medic, Dr. Miriam Halavi, civilian specialist, attached to field ops. Age 35. She'd been a trauma surgeon in Tel Hashimer, pulled from white walls into black corridors by her fluency in Arabic and her nerves of iron. Miriam was the type to explain arterial pressure mid-firefight. Not because she didn't feel fear, but because explaining science calmed her. She smelled faintly of antiseptic and cloves. Once, while we waited in a Damascus alley, she whispered that she collected pressed flowers tucked between medical notes, as if soft petals could balance human ruin. I didn't know then how cruelly those petals would scatter in her mind. 3. Demolitions expert David Ashregev, age 29, a wiry man with restless hands, always tapping, always sketching in the air the shape of charges he hadn't yet placed. He had the arrogance of youth, but beneath it, the exactitude of an engineer. To him, structures weren't walls, they were puzzles waiting to be solved with powder and steel. He carried 3 different detonators, like talismans, also carried a silver lighter, dented, engraved with a name I never asked about. Sometimes, when silence pressed too heavy, he'd flick it open just to hear the clack. He laughed easily, but it was the kind of laugh that hid impatience with the world. 4. Communications specialist, Yonatan Echo Baruch, age 31. Quiet, almost monastic, the way only men who live inside signals can be. Yonatan could pull voices out of static, align frequencies with a surgeon's precision. His headset was like an extra organ. He slept with it around his neck, muttering in half-dreams about bandwidths and call signs. He once admitted that as a boy he tuned into foreign stations just to hear strangers speak languages he didn't understand. Voices prove the world is bigger than borders, he'd said. That stayed with me. He smoked Turkish cigarettes down to the paper, the ember glowing like a dying star in his hand. 5. Veteran leader Colonel Rhett, Shlomo Dahan, age 56, the oldest among us. Drafted in 48, a ghost of every war since. His knees cracked when he knelt, his back bent under years of weight. But his voice still carried the authority of command. Shlomo did not boast, he simply remembered. Every hill in Lebanon had a story for him, every ruined village a scar he could trace. He wore his fatigue jacket like armor stitched from history. In the field, his steadiness was a shield for us all. He carried a battered canteen, dented from a bullet in 67, swore the water inside always tasted faintly of iron. We assembled in the safe house basement, converted wine cellar with frost crawling down its stone walls. The air smelled of damp earth and kerosene lamps. Our contact, an American liaison officer, arrived at 2,300 hours sharp. He never gave his name, just credentials, stamped with seals too blurred to verify. The briefing was delivered with the precision of a surgeon cutting away flesh. Direct, cold, no wasted words. Objectives. Enter facility at grid 3406N, 35th 39E. Confirm security integrity of the prisoner. If subject compromised, execute containment protocols. Never explained what those protocols entailed. Tide Merrim pressed him. Define containment. The American's eyes flicked to his folder, then back. Containment means ensuring the subject does not exit the perimeter, at any cost. That was the first time I saw even Shlomo's steady gaze waver. We studied grainy photograph corridors washed in fluorescent glare. Reinforced blast doors, an inner chamber sunk 30 meters beneath bedrock. But what drew my attention most wasn't the architecture, it was the absence. In every frame, shadows fell unnaturally, as though light bent away from certain corners. The Americans didn't mention the prisoner's identity, only that it had been held since 1975, 8 years in isolation. No contact, no trial, no record, just locked away. Our kit was laid out in silence. Standard suppressed sidearms, compact FN submachine guns, 2. Demolition packs, Ash's responsibility. Comes rigged with dual encryption channels, Echo's pride. Portable med kit with plasma units, Miriam's 1 Geiger counter. That detail caught my attention. Radioactive materials weren't mentioned, yet the device sat among our gear like a quiet warning. The deployment order came at 200. A truck disguised as a Red Cross supply. Vehicle ferried us north through mountain passes. Snow lashed the windshield, turning headlights into tunnels of white. Inside the cabin, no one spoke. The only sound was Echo's steady clicking as he tuned frequencies no one else could hear. Every checkpoint was cleared before we arrived. 2. Easily. Syrian patrols, militia scouts, they all seemed to melt away before we reached them. It felt less like infiltration, more like being escorted by an unseen hand. When we neared Zalhel, the driver stopped. "End of my road," he muttered, refusing to look us in the eyes. Left us with the truck and vanished into the snow. We checked our watches to 47 hours. The mission was live. Tan gave a single nod. Shlomo adjusted his old canteen. Ash flicked his lighter once and smiled like a man bluffing the abyss. Miriam whispered a prayer under her breath. Echo's cigarette ember glowed, then died. We moved out. Silent, precise. Shadows among shadows. We approached on foot from the east, slipping like ghosts along a dead ridge. The truck had taken us to the last clearing 12 hours, then left, as if our presence offended it. We moved single file, breathing shallow, boots sinking into powder that swallowed sound. I-10 led with an infrared monocular. His silhouette cut the horizon like a blunt instrument. I watched him move and felt the machine of the team tighten gears, meshing, instinct aligning. Ash carried the pack with explosives, made a faint mechanical thump against his hip with every step. Miriam kept the medkit compressed against her chest, fingers brushing the pressed flowers she'd hidden beneath a bandage wrap. Echo walked near the rear, fingers tracing knobs on his rig, pulling stray voices from the wind and cataloging them like a priest counting names. The perimeter fence was the first real evidence that the compound existed in 3 dimensions. Not just map coordinates, but a living geometry. Chain link rose like a low moan from the snow, topped with concertina wire that bit through gloves. The gate had been welded shut, but not recently. Ice had braided itself through the welds. Ash knelt, gloved hands working with instruments that hummed faintly. He muttered, technical and irreverent. "We're not picking locks, we're rewriting them." We cut a single surgical entry, no alarms, no sparks, only Ash's breath and the whispered hiss of a thermal saw. The incision in the fence threw the night into a new frame. The compound-S floodlights were blackened, deliberately dead. Something either human or not had killed the light. We slipped through the gap and into the compound's bone. Inside, the air changed. It was colder, yes, but also viscous, as if each inhalation fed against a thin membrane. My Geiger counter, clipped to my vest, ticked once, then thrummed in a cadence that didn't match background levels. Echo frowned, micro-display painting the digits in his retinas. "Background's off," he said quietly. "Either the sensors are wrong, or the site's been scrubbed." We moved under the shadow of satellite dishes that looked like sleeping whales. The path to the service entrance took us along a maintenance corridor. Concrete underfoot, pipes above that made the building feel as if it breathed through metal. Our clipped radio pings came back with the delay of long wires. Somewhere down the line, a pump coughed as if clearing its throat. At the rear service door, the lock was a cage of redundancy. Physical tumblers backed by keypad and biometric arrays. ITAN produced the forged access credentials the liaison had provided and slid a slim card into the slot. The keypad illuminated blue. Clinically, the reader hummed. For a heartbeat, we were actors, playing a part. Then the reader spat a green light, and the lock clicked open. Too easy. "Why would they leave it like that?" Miriam asked, voice low. "They're keeping something confidence," Iteen said. "Or complacency." We pressed inside. The interior smelled of ionized metal, and something old like a library closed for decades. Fluorescent fixtures sputtered along a corridor that angled downward. Our headlamps knitted thin cones of light. Everything else fell away into a textureless dark. The architecture was intentionally disorienting. Irregular walls, unsymmetrical corridors, corners that didn't obey logic. I traced them as if mapping a brain. About 40 meters in, Echo's headset snapped to life, not with someone speaking in a language we recognized, at least not entirely. It was a modulation, whispers layered over static, a rhythm that invited recognition and denied it at the same breath. Yonatan adjusted the gain until the whisper resolved into syllables that scraped my memory like fingernails. Names, he breathed. It's reading names. A sound like a slow and impossible moved through the corridor. I turned and saw a shadow that did not belong to any of us, a band of darker air rolling along the wall, as if the light itself had been shaved and folded. It left footprints where light had bent. No physical steps, but impressions in the way the air leaned. Ash stopped and laughed, brittle. Great, he said. Not even the dark respects us anymore. We kept moving. Every 20 meters something altered the geometry. A stair that ended in a wall. A doorway that opened onto a corridor we'd just passed. Time insisted on slippage. My watch read 3:49, then 3:51, then blinked back to 3:45 as if the seconds were being argued about by the building itself. At a junction, we paused. I-10 cupped his hand to his ear and listened not for sound, but for absence. On my mark, he whispered. Sweep. We check. We don't split. He looked at each of us, the ritual of command simple and absolute. As we swept, something at the edge of my light moved, and my name brushed the hairs on the back of my neck. Not shouted. It's not delivered by any throat I could find. It's just my name, folded into the hum of the building like a signature pressed into wet clay. I had not used that name in years. I'd not told anyone my real name. Yet the corridor knew it, and it said it as if to mark ownership. We advanced. The corridor's air tasted metallic now, and my throat picked up a dryness that had nothing to do with cold. Echo's rig began to print spectrums I could not parse. Miriam's fingers went white around the medkit strap. Ash's lighter stopped clacking. Shlomo bit his lip until blood gathered at the seam of his mouth. We reached the service hatch that led to the deeper levels. The heavy loader door yawned open like the mouth of an animal long dead and perfectly preserved. A vent in the ceiling whispered a pressure change, 28% oxygen, and a subtle spike in unknown particulates. I wrote the numbers in the margin of my mind like a tally. I-10 checked the harnesses. Ready? He asked. We had to be. We descended. The access shaft dropped 30 meters into the hill, reinforced with poured concrete ribs and steel plating that bore no contractor's mark. The Americans had erased their fingerprints. Our descent was by ladder narrow, icy rungs that squealed with every boot. The gloves felt slick on the metal, though no moisture clung to it. By the time we reached the bottom, the air had changed again, not colder, denser. Each breath carried weight, as if the molecules themselves resisted inhalation. Miriam checked her portable scanner. Numbers flickered across the screen, stabilized, then corrupted into alien glyphs. She blinked. Reset. Same result. Her lips tightened, but she said nothing. The corridor waiting for us was long and rectangular, lit by fluorescent bars that flickered irregularly. Some pulsed, like heartbeats. Others dimmed until they glowed only when our footsteps neared. The rhythm of the place felt alive like being inside a chest cavity. I-10 ordered a sweep formation. Shlomo forward left, Ash forward right, Miriam central, Echo rear, myself tail. Submachine guns raised, safeties off. Our boots echoed in a chamber that should not have carried sound so far. Each footfall multiplied, as if a company marched behind us. The first checkpoint was a blast door. Triple reinforced, a wheel lock at chest height. The wheel bore scratches, not from tools, but from fingernails. Miriam leaned close with her headlamp. Human nails, desperate old. I-10 tested the wheel moved smoother than expected. Door unsealed with a hydraulic hiss that seemed too loud, too eager. Beyond, a stairwell spiraling downward, narrower, more suffocating. Walls carried stains I couldn't identify, blooms that crept against gravity. Descending, Echo muttered through clenched teeth, picking something up. Not radio, not local. It's like the building's humming. We stopped on the landing. I pressed my ear to the wall. He was right. There was a vibration, too steady to be structural. A drone pitched low, threaded with what sounded like voices. Not speech, something earlier than language, like syllables from beneath the skin of history. At the second level, the architecture shifted. Gone were the sterile military lines. Instead, the corridors curved subtly, like they'd been poured in imitation of something organic. Angles bent at odd degrees that tricked the eye into thinking walls leaned, floor rising or falling against sense. Ash swore under his breath, "This isn't American design. This is hell. I don't know what this is." Security cameras tracked our movement, though most were cracked, lenses ruptured. One still functioned. It swiveled not with servo whine, but with a kind of wet click. It locked onto Echo. He froze, headset buzzing. The feed light glowed red, then white, then extinguished. We reached another blast door, stenciled across it in peeling paint. Level 3. Containment. No insignia, no seal of the United States. Nothing to claim ownership. It's just the word containment, as if that alone was explanation. Shlomo set his hand on the wheel, stopped. His voice was steady but low. "I've been in prisons, been in bunkers." He shook his head. "This is not built for men." I-10 gave the order. "On me." Weapons high. The door opened. The room beyond was cavernous, far too vast to exist under the hillside we had mapped. A hangar carved into stone, ribbed with support beams, lit by a grid of flickering lamps. Catwalks spidered the walls, leading to sealed chambers of reinforced glass. Most were empty. One was not. From across the chamber, I saw a movement. A pale shape, humanoid only in the most generous sense, standing behind glass, etched with sigils that pulsed faintly blue. The figure was motionless, but the air around it rippled like heat rising from asphalt. Miriam exhaled, too loud in the silence. Ash's lighter clicked open, shut, open. Echo whispered a single word, not into his cums but into the air itself, listening. I-10 steadied his weapon. His jaw was stone. Target in sight. Attained discipline. But the prisoner, if that's what it was, never moved. Not a twitch, not a blink. It only stood there, in a cage built beneath nations, beneath wars, waiting, and as the lamps flickered, its shadow moved independently across the glass. We fanned out across the chamber with disciplined precision. The cavern's dimensions were wrong. Our survey maps said 30 meters across, but by eye, it spanned at least 60. Echo confirmed with his rangefinder, then frowned. 31 meters, he whispered, shaking his head. But it looks bigger. His voice broke off, as if the math itself refused coherence. I-10 ordered systematic sweep. Catwalks, cells, terminals, central platform. Standard protocols. Treat it like any black site prison. No assumptions. Ash and I moved toward the nearest glass cell. Empty. Its restraint steel cuffs. Padded braces were still buckled, as though something had slipped free without force. On the floor lay pages of medical printouts, the ink smeared into strange spirals by water or something wetter. One spiral pulsed faintly under my light, then faded. Miriam kept scanning air samples. "Oxygen's normal," she said, then her brow tightened. "But nitrogen levels fluctuate." She reset the unit. Same anomaly. Air's alive somehow. Shlomo walked the perimeter, running a palm over the ribbed steel. "This isn't American," he muttered again. "It's older, reinforced, but borrowed." At the central platform, we found a console. Screens were dead, but buttons remained backlit in dull amber. Labels weren't in English, or any alphabet we recognized. Echo traced his finger across a row of glyphs. Act. His headset crackled. He winced. "It's responding. Act. Not to touch. To recognition." He pulled his hand back quickly. I-10 stayed clinical. He logged positions, photographed cells, marked anomalies. His discipline kept us tethered. Without it, the cavern would have swallowed us in its silence. We circled the occupied chamber last. The glass was 3 layers thick, filled with a fluid that rippled as though breathing. Inside, the pale figure. Roughly human outline, 2 arms, 2 legs but elongated, wrong proportions. Skin like candle wax stretched too thin. No hair. No mouth I could see. Eyes closed. Miriam whispered, sedated. "No sedation system attached?" I answered. Number 4. Nothing. Ash stepped close, lighter flicking nervously. Maybe dead. As if in answer, the figure's chest rose slightly. The ripple spread through the glass. faint rings crossing the sigils. Shlomo gripped his rifle tighter. Alive, or something close. The console near that chamber was active. Screen showed waveforms, vertical pulses scrolling like heartbeats. Echo leaned in, headset alive with whispers. "It's not just vitals," he said. "It's communication." Aitan cut him off. "We're not here to interpret. Log everything, no engagement." We logged. We photographed. We measured corridors, air density, wall thickness. All the motions of rational men in an irrational space. But even as we ticked boxes, something shifted. Our radios began returning faint echoes of our own voices, seconds delayed, distorted, layered with tones that didn't belong to any of us. We told ourselves it was interference. What standard ops demanded explanations. Dot. But in the marrow of silence, I could feel the building listening. The prisoners still unmoving cast 3 different shadows on 3 different walls. The disturbance began subtly. Tremor in the floor. So faint, it might have been ignored if Shlomo's cigarette ash hadn't slid sideways across his boot. "Seismic?" Miriam asked, checking her instruments. Nothing registered. No tremor. No tectonic activity. Just stillness. Then the radios picked it up. Static sharp. Rhythmic. Like teeth grinding against metal. The distortion wasn't random. It pulsed in 3s, like a code. Echo froze. Headset pressed to his ear. "It's our voices," he whispered. Playback. Reversed. Layered. We silenced comes, thinking it interference. Yet the cavern kept humming in that staccato pattern, faint but present, vibrating through the glass cells. The pale figure in the chamber stirred its fingers twitching, once, twice, before lying still again. Ash swore under his breath, flicking his lighter open and shut. "This place is feeding on us." Recording. Aitan snapped discipline. His voice was iron, but his eyes betrayed calculation. He ordered a sweep of the far corridor and auxiliary passage half collapsed with rubble. We advanced in 2 pairs. Passage was narrow, reinforced beams twisted as though melted, not broken. At the end stood a sealed bulkhead, its surface carved with the same sigils we'd seen on the chamber glass. But these were deeper, gouged as if from inside. Miriam raised her scanner to photograph when her display flickered. For an instant, every glyph glowed white-hot on the monitor, though the wall itself remained dark. Her device powered down completely. That's when we heard it. Sound. Not footsteps, not machinery. A dragging metallic resonance. It came from beyond the bulkhead, long scraping intervals, like chains pulled across stone. Then silence. Ash muttered, "Something's awake." We fell back, weapons raised, covering angles, but nothing breached. The noise stopped as suddenly as it began. When we returned to the main chamber, the glass prison was fogged from the inside. Condensation dripped like sweat. Miriam checked her instruments again. Reading spiked erratically. Nitrogen dropping, oxygen surging, then normalizing as if the atmosphere itself had exhaled. Aitan logged it as an environmental anomaly. His pen shook slightly when he wrote. We told ourselves it was structural settling, pressure changes, natural explanations. That's what training demanded. But in that moment, standing under humming lights, I knew. Whatever the Americans had locked down here wasn't dormant. It was listening. The first disturbance we could rationalize, the second stripped away our excuses. It began with the shadows. The lighting in the chamber was steady fluorescent tubes rigged to a generator we carried, but the walls betrayed us. Our silhouettes didn't align with our bodies. Ash leaned left, and his shadow lagged half a second behind, jerking to catch up. Miriam adjusted her scanner. Her shadow multiplied 2, 3 outlines each, distorted at different angles. Echo muttered, "We're not alone in here." We pressed deeper into the facility. Corridors branched like veins, lined with reinforced doors stamped with U.S. insignia half buried under Arabic graffiti. One corridor ended in a collapsed stairwell. Another led to what had once been an interrogation, block rows of cells with observation slits. Dust coated everything, except for one set of footprints. Bare, human-like, fresh, leading out of a locked cell. Ash aimed his light through the slit. Empty room, untouched cot, chains hanging. Yet the prints continued down the corridor, weaving, splitting 2 sets, then 3, circling back like something walked with us, pacing our movements. Then came the voices. The coms were on local channel, encrypted, no external feed. Still, we heard our names. Mine first, drawn out in a whisper like a parent calling a child. Then Miriam's. Then Ash's overlapping in faint delay. "Cut transmissions," I ordered, voice low but steady. "Now." We shut down radios, yanked earpieces free. The whispering didn't stop. It bled into the air itself, carried through the ventilation shafts, threading into our ears without electronics. The cadence wasn't hostile. It was curious, patient. By the time we regrouped in the central chamber, Echo's hands shook so badly he dropped his headset. It's not just hearing us sits inside the system, using the steel, using the air. Miriam's instruments confirmed the impossible. Electromagnetic spikes rose in rhythm with the whispers, as if the entire facility had become one massive resonator. IDC tried to anchor us, focus on the mission. The prisoner remained secure. That's priority. His jaw tightened when he said it, eyes flicking toward the fogged glass. But the chamber wasn't secure anymore. Handprints now pressed against the interior, too many, overlapping, small and large, clawed and human. Some prints faced inward, as though something outside was trying to break in. Ash swore, slamming his fist against his rifle stock. "We're being played," Miriam whispered. "No, we're being studied." The humming deepened, so low it vibrated our chests, rattling teeth. Lights flickered, dying one by one, until only a cone of illumination hovered over the glass prison. In that dim halo, the figure inside stirred again. This time it sat upright. Its head turned slowly toward us, and for the first time I felt seen. The prisoner rose. At first it looked fragile, malnourished limbs elongated, chest concave, skin was pale as candle wax, almost translucent. But its movements were deliberate, controlled, like an officer standing to address a room. The glass trembled, as if resisting. But the creature didn't touch it. It only leaned forward, letting the fog smear around its silhouette until its face became visible. Not a face, not fully. Its features shifted with every blink. Dot. In one moment, it was the gaunt profile of a man, no sharp lips, thin. Then the next, a woman's eyes stared back, heavy with grief. Then, nothing at all but smooth, pale surface, reflecting our faces back at us in grotesque mimicry. Echo dropped to his knees, headset forgotten. "It knows us," he stammered. "It's mapping us." The glass sang. A low vibration, harmonic, spreading through the floor into our boots, into our bones. Miriam scrambled with her equipment, muttering scientific jargon that collapsed into whispers of disbelief. Her scanner displayed glyphs not in any database, symbols rearranging themselves in real time as if the machine were learning its language. Itan raised his sidearm, arm steady, but jaw clenched. "Do not fire unless it breaches containment." Ash laughed bitterly. "Containment's an illusion." The creature opened its mouth. No sound came, at least, not from its lips. The noise arrived inside us, bypassing ears altogether. A layered chorus of our own voices speaking words we hadn't said, recounting memories we hadn't shared. My childhood street, Miriam's mother's prayer, Ash's first firefight, its echoes stutter as a boy. It spoke us back to ourselves, as if our lives were data files it could access at will. The chamber lights pulsed with its rhythm. Shadows detached from our boots, stretching toward the glass like supplicants. One by one, the handprints inside the cell shifted, flattening into uniform palms pressed outward, an army of unseen witnesses, frozen just behind the pane. Miriam's breathing quickened. It's not communicating, it's assimilating. The air grew metallic, thick, like breathing through blood. Our tongues went numb, and without touching, the glass split. A hairline fracture traced downward with a sound like ice cracking on a lake. Itan barked. Positions. Ash leveled explosives, but hesitated, too close, too confined. We'd all be torn apart. The fracture widened, spreading across the barrier in luminous lines, not breaking outward, peeling inward, as if reality itself were curling away to make room for it. Still, the figure hadn't moved beyond a step forward. That step was enough. My vision blurred, tunneled. For a heartbeat, the chamber wasn't stone and steel, but a desert plain under a sky with two moons. I smelled burning copper, heard voices chanting in languages that made my teeth ache, saw towers of salt rising and collapsing in endless cycles. When I blinked, I was back, but my rifle was warm in my hands as if I'd fired it. Echo screamed, clutching his head. His cums disconnected, cum spat static, shaped like syllables, syllables shaped like commands. He began repeating them, his voice merging with the static until he wasn't speaking to us anymore. He was transmitting. Aitan grabbed him, shaking him hard, but Echo's eyes were all white, rolling back. His lips moved without sound. The prisoner watched, head cocked slightly, as though curious at our panic, and then Nit smiled. Not human, not kind. Just the recognition of something old that had waited long enough. The fracture spider webbed across the glass with a thunderous crack. Shard fell free, dissolving before it hit the floor. Containment was no longer a word that meant anything. The first direct encounter had begun. The fracture widened until the entire barrier shimmered like liquid. Glass wasn't shattering anymore, it was unweaving, strips of translucent matter curling away as though obeying a law none of us understood. The prisoner stepped forward. Not out, never fully out, but forward enough that its presence radiated beyond containment. The air thickened. Every breath scraped metallic across the throat, every heartbeat louder than boots on stone. Echo convulsed on the ground. Static bled from his mouth in sharp bursts, jagged inhuman syllables. His radio, long shut down, glowed faintly, feeding on nothing but his pulse. Ton ordered me and Ash to restrain him. But when I touched Echo's shoulder, my fingers sank a fraction too deep, like his flesh had thinned to water. He screamed in my voice. Miriam lost composure. Her instruments went wild, readings spiking into impossible ranges, oxygen at 300%, gravity dipping and then multiplying. She dropped the scanner, whispering equations, numbers slipping into prayers. At one point she spoke in a language none of us recognized, her voice layered threefold, each register out of sync. Ash armed a block charge. We end it now. Blow the chamber. Collapse the whole place. His hands trembled, but his eyes burned with reckless resolve. Aitan grabbed him by the vest, snarling, "You blow it, we bury ourselves with it." But the entity heard. It turned toward Ash, its shifting face solidifying for a moment into something resembling his own, pale, twisted. Its lips moved in sync with his. When Ash muttered, "What the fuck?" the prisoner whispered the same words, just half a second behind, a delayed echo. Ash staggered back, clutching his chest. His vest straps fused to his skin as though welded. He screamed as the fabric melted into him, stitching his armor to his body. The humming deepened, now rising and falling like breath.
How the walls themselves flexed.
Corridors stretched, shrank, twisted at impossible angles. Lamps swayed, though no wind touched them. Footsteps echoed from directions we hadn't taken, sometimes from ceilings, sometimes behind sealed doors. We regrouped, weapons raised, trying to form a perimeter, but the geometry betrayed us. Every step forward returned us closer to the central chamber. Time looped in fragments. I remember glancing at my watch, seeing 3 different times in the span of seconds. Miriam began tearing pages from her notebook, writing equations only to strike them out, her hands covered in graphite and blood. She said, "It's rewriting physics, rewriting us." I enforced command through clenched teeth. "Focus. Target remains contained." He pointed to the chamber. Though by then the word contained was meaningless. Because the entity was no longer inside, its body never fully crossed, but its influence seeped through the fractures. Shadows detached, crawling across the floor, pulling at our boots. When I looked down, mine had eyes, small, glimmering, unblinking. Echo finally went still. But when we rolled him over, his chest rose and fell in sync with the static still pouring from his radio. His voice, if you could call it, that merged with the comsnet, even offline. He had become a relay. Miriam touched his wrist, searching for a pulse, and recoiled. It's broadcasting through him, using him as antenna. Aitan ordered her to cut the connection. She raised her scalpel, then froze. "Commander, there is no vein, no structure. It's hollow." Echo's skin was smooth beneath the incision. No muscle, no blood, only pale light. Ash, strapped into his own armor like a grotesque shell, shouted incoherently, swinging his rifle at shadows that weren't there. His barrel flashed gunfire, deafening in the chamber butt.
Ow.
The rounds ricocheted in directions physics shouldn't have allowed. One bullet struck the ceiling, but the impact flared against the floor. The prisoner tilted its head, watching, always watching. It's not moving beyond the breach, not advancing, but drawing us inward. I felt it in my chest. A pull. Memories sliding free like film reels, unspooling. I smelled my father's cologne, heard my sister's laughter, saw a streetlight flicker over my childhood home, all projected in the periphery of my vision. But none of it was mine anymore. It was showing me, feeding them back to me, tainted, rearranged. Miriam screamed suddenly, clutching her eyes. Blood streamed from her tear ducts. She wailed, "I see century species, not human medicine across time." Then her voice fractured into words that had no consonants, syllables colliding into ultraviolet tones. Her notebook pages floated off the ground, orbiting her like satellites, equations glowing as if lit from within. Ash stumbled, collapsing to his knees, armor fused, breath shallow.
Yes.
His shadow no longer matched his body. It stood tall even when he crouched, twitching independently, rifle raised. Itin and I dragged him back, the commander barking orders more for discipline than hope. The chamber's lights died. For a heartbeat, we stood in absolute blackness. Then illumination, but not from lamps, but from the entity itself. Its body pulsed with pale fire, glyphs racing beneath its translucent skin. The glow painted the walls, the floors, US. In that moment, none of us could deny it. The prisoner wasn't a prisoner. It was a signal, a transmitter, a seed of something vast and ancient, only pretending to be bound. And we had already been claimed. Containment failed at 0321 hours. The last of the glass peeled away in spirals, dissolving into nothing before touching ground. No shards, no dust. The cell was no longer a chamber but a throne room. Prisoner stepped forward. Its body wasn't solid, rippled, fluctuating between forms we could half recognize, and others that defied vision. One moment it was a gaunt man, the next a column of light, then a shifting lattice of geometry that burned itself into our retinas. It didn't cross the threshold. It unfolded through it, like a page torn from a book and redrawn over our world. Itin shouted orders, his voice cracking with strain. "Fall back. Defensive line. Don't let it breach the facility perimeter." Asha, still fused into his armor, laughed manically, his voice rasping through bloodied lips. "Perimeter? It's inside us already." His shadow fired his rifle before he could. The muzzle flash bloomed from the floor, the ceiling, from places no weapon aimed. Bullets tore patterns into the walls, glyphs forming briefly in the impacts before fading. Miriam staggered forward, clutching her scalp, words tumbling out in a dozen languages. "It wants a vessel, a channel. We are conductors." Her hands trembled as though pulled by strings. Equations scrawled in light across her skin, vanishing as quickly as they appeared. Echo was gone, or rather replaced. His body convulsed once, then went utterly still. From his open mouth came a sound like every radio frequency at once. War broadcasts, lullabies, distress calls, number stations, all braided together into a single note that shook our bones. The prisoner leaned toward him, face reshaping into Echo's own. Then it spoke. Not aloud, but through every surface. Concrete hummed with its voice. My weapon vibrated with syllables. My blood pulsed in cadence. "You built walls to hold me. You built circuits to hear me. Now you are both." We opened fire reflex desperation. Tracers cut across the chamber, but rounds bent midair, curving like birds in migration. Some bullets disappeared entirely. Others reappeared lodged in our gear, our boots, the walls behind us. My rifle grew hot, burning through gloves, though I hadn't fired half my magazine. The prisoner absorbed our attack with disinterest. Its skin, if you could call it, that shimmered with impact ripples, then smoothed. Then came the worst. The facility itself turned against us. Corridors rearranged, folding inward, stairs climbing in circles that led back to the same chamber. Doors opened into desert landscapes under alien skies, only to blink shut before we could enter.
Oh.
The architecture bent, alive, as though we had been swallowed into a body far older than the earth. Itan drew his combat knife, the last human gesture of defiance. His hand shook, but his voice didn't. If we can't destroy it, we buy time, fall back and record. Someone has to know. But the prisoner only tilted its head, face shifting again into Aiton's likeness, lips curling upward, and the room collapsed into sound. The humming surged into aurora alarms, heartbeats, footsteps, gunfire, layered into one endless tone. My vision whitened, every nerve alight, every sense consumed. For a second, I saw all of us not as soldiers, but as outlines in a vast lattice, nodes in a circuit that stretched across galaxies. Ash's body arched, bones cracking audibly as his shadow pulled free entirely. Standing beside him, armed and moving independently. Miriam's eyes glowed with glyphs as she scribbled invisible formulae on air. Echo's chest cavity burst open soundlessly, not with gore but with white radiance. I-10 forced me toward the far corridor. His voice came through like a broken transmission. Record, witness in this. Then the prisoner raised its hand, not in attack. In benediction, every light died. And in the dark, we understood. It hadn't escaped. It hadn't needed to. We had carried it out the moment we stepped inside. I don't remember deciding to run. One moment the chamber was a cathedral of light and noise. The next I was sprinting through warped corridors, dragging Ash by his fused armor while Miriam stumbled beside me. I-10 covered the rear, knife still in hand, shouting commands that echoed strangely, sometimes ahead of us, sometimes behind. Echo did not follow. He couldn't. His body had become something else, a broadcasting tower left behind to pulse the entity's message through stone and steel. His static cries chased us down every corridor, each syllable striking like hammer blows. The facility resisted our flight. Stairwells led upward only to deposit us deeper. Corridors stretched and then collapsed, folding inward, stone flowing like wet clay. Lamps burst in cascades of sparks, glyphs etched into the walls where glass had shattered. We turned corners and found ourselves staring back into rooms we had left minutes earlier, though each time something had changed. A chair missing. A bloodstain where there hadn't been one. Our own shadows lagging several steps behind. Ash grew heavier. It's not just from exhaustion. His armor had fused so tightly to his body, it was as though we were dragging a man welded into steel. His breathing came ragged, shallow, but his eyes blazed with fury. "Drop me," he rasped. "You'll move faster." I-10 snapped. No one left behind. But his voice cracked. He knew it was a lie. We reached an access tunnel lined with rusting pipes, the air so thick with metal temps it felt like drinking iron. Ahead, a faint draft fresh air. An exit. Salvation. Miriam stopped suddenly. Wait. Her voice was wrong-layered, fractured. She pointed at the tunnel floor. Footprints. Our own perfectly preserved in the dust, marching ahead of us, then looping back, and splitting, spiraling in impossible patterns until they formed glyphs we'd seen on the chamber glass. The entity wasn't chasing. It was hurting. I-10 cursed under his breath, shoved us forward. Doesn't matter. Out now. We stumbled through the tunnel, lungs burning. The draft grew stronger, the taste of the surface undeniable. My watch read for 2 hours. We had been inside barely 40 minutes. But when we burst into the night air, the stars were wrong. The sky rippled with too many constellations, familiar and alien at once.
How?
The desert stretched in every direction, dunes shifting as though breathing. The moon hung low and red, but shadows fell upward, stretching into the sky instead of along the ground. We collapsed onto the sand, gasping. The cool night air should have been relief, but it carried the same metallic temps as the tunnels. Miriam checked her instruments, shaking. 14 hours elapsed, she whispered. Inside, less than 1. Out here half a day? My watch still ticked at 4:02. I-10 pulled the sat phone from his pack, trying for extraction. Static screamed back, but in the midst of it, words formed our own voices, calling coordinates, confirming pickup. Ash groaned, clawing at his chest where the armor had fused. Not us, he hissed. It's them. It's already topside. The desert wind shifted. Sand hissed like whispers across the dunes. In the distance, a line of headlights appeared, a compression convoy. Right on schedule. Too precise. Too calm. I lowered the phone slowly. "This is wrong," he muttered. His hand tightened on his knife, as if that thin blade could ward off the impossible. We had escaped the facility, but nothing about the world outside felt like ours anymore. We reached the convoy. But the light of the vehicles did not illuminate reality. It only revealed the alterations already inflicted. Ash's armor remained fused to his chest and arms, the metal now indistinguishable from flesh. He moved jerkily, his shadow sometimes stepping independently of him, rifling his rifle in directions he hadn't aimed. He whispered to it, half in laughter, half in panic. His voice sometimes layered, overlapping in tones we could not parse. Miriam's eyes glowed faintly with glyphs that no one could read. Her medical knowledge, once precise and meticulous, had scrambled across centuries, across species. She muttered anatomy she had never learned, procedures that belonged to alien bodies, recalling pharmacology impossible to synthesize. Yet when asked, she could not explain the simplest human wound. Aitan's memory had fractured, retained tactical discipline, but could not recall our mission start or the facility layout. Every attempt to reconstruct the mission collapsed into inconsistencies. His voice remained steady, but he occasionally spoke as if referring to an event that never happened, or a subordinate who did not exist. I had lost an arm, not violently, no blood, no pain. One second it was there, the next it was simply gone, the limb severed cleanly by some unseen law. My body adjusted instantly, though the phantom sensation remained, a dull ache of absence. Echo was gone. His body had been left behind as a vessel, irreversibly altered. His voice had become radio static, tones we could recognize as speech but never fully decode. Sometimes he hummed unintentionally, transmitting half-conscious messages into empty channels. And I remember only fragments, glimpses of corridors that never existed. Conversations with faces that weren't human. Memory itself had been rewritten. Every attempt to recall the mission yielded only the empty facility story. Sterile halls, locked cells, nothing more. We were survivors. The convoy drove us away, but the landscape refused familiarity. Desert colors shifted in impossible gradients. Shadows bent against physics. The night sky rotated slowly against the natural celestial pattern, stars blinking like slow pulses. Aitan's eyes lingered on the horizon, silent. He knew, as we all did, survival had a cost far beyond the body. Whatever we had encountered beneath that hill had not been destroyed, contained, or even fully present. It had marked us, and there would be no returning to the world as it once was. The debrief room was sterile. White walls, polished floor, tables set with perfect symmetry.
Ow.
No trace of chaos, no hint of what we had endured. The extraction team smiled too evenly, nodding in predetermined rhythm. Aitan led us in, each step echoing in a space that refused warmth. Ash sat rigid, fused armor humming faintly, as if resonating with some unknown frequency. Miriam clutched her notebook, glyphs dimly glowing beneath the surface. The lieutenant with eyes to calm greeted us. Report. His voice was neutral. Due neutral. We spoke carefully, cautiously, layered descriptions, technical details, coordinates, air readings, cell layouts. Each time we mentioned the entity, the room subtly shifted. Our words faltered in our own mouths. It moved beyond containment, I said. The lieutenant smiled. Containment was never breached. Aitan's knuckles whitened. Sir, we witnessed your instruments are corrupted. Readings false. You experience fatigue. Stress hallucinations, he interrupted smoothly. All anomalies are logged as environmental fluctuation. Mission remains classified, no further action required. Miriam tried again. But the personnel accounted for, he replied. Facilities intact. All operational parameters nominal. Echo's absence was noted as medical reassignment. No explanation. Ash's fused armor documented as standard experimental suit malfunction, limb losses omitted entirely. My missing arm, ever recorded. Files were rewritten as we spoke. I glimpsed the database. Our reports were replaced with sanitized schematics, photographs stripped of anomalies, notes rewritten in sterile, meaningless terms. Words we had just spoken gone, overwritten by calm clinical phrasing. Whenever I tried to protest, my own voice betrayed me. It became all operations executed successfully. my words twisting in midair before reaching their ears. Even I-10's memory began to adjust. He nodded along politely, repeating phrases that were not his own. The lieutenant concluded, voice final, "Your assignment is complete. Files sealed. Non-existent archives. We will report to new posts effective immediately." We were escorted out. The hallway seemed longer than when we entered. Lights flickered in rhythms unfamiliar. Instruments we carried behaved normally, yet every sense told a story our minds could no longer verify. I realized then, survival was not enough. Reality itself had been rewritten. Memories altered, evidence erased. The entity, whatever it was, remained untouched, patient, waiting. The suppression was total, precise, indifferent. We were witnesses without testimony, survivors without story. And the world above, touched, unknowing, and unprepared, continued in ignorance. The only record left was what we carried in our fractured minds. A reminder: truth can be classified, memory manipulated, and reality itself sanitized, yet the consequences remain. I sit at my desk in an apartment that should feel safe, but it doesn't. The room is dim, lit only by a desk lamp that flickers in irregular pulses. Shadows crawl along the walls, sometimes independent, sometimes multiplying. One even stands in the corner, leaning just slightly too far, too tall. The computer monitor hums quietly. Containment logs I never submitted appear and disappear in looping sequences, counting down in unreadable glyphs. I try to close the files, but the keyboard refuses, keys pressing themselves in rhythm with the countdown. Across the room, my watch ticks incorrectly, and the hands twist backward and forward, settling nowhere. Every glance reveals a new impossibility. Time is wrong, and yet I am trapped inside its flow. I hear heavy footsteps in the hallway. Too heavy for a man, too measured to be random. Floorboards groan beneath a weight that isn't mine. Electronics blink and flash. The refrigerator emits a soft, white hum, letters and symbols dancing across its surface. A shadow detaches from the floor and leans over the table, fingers stretching impossibly long, touching nothing yet leaving ripples in the air. I try to speak, to write, to report, but words twist on my tongue. Every attempt becomes a lie or nonsense. Paper curls, ink runs, and glyphs appear where none should be. I close my eyes. When I open them, the shadows remain. They sometimes mimic me, sometimes anticipate me. The silence is thick, oppressive. Yet the apartment feels normal in fleeting moments. My bed, my chair, my desk. I can sit. I can breathe. But these moments are punctuated by the impossible. I understand now. It does not need to destroy me. It does not need to hurry. It is patient. The entity waits. It waits while we finish destroying ourselves. I write this knowing the words may bend before they are read, knowing the truth may never escape these walls, and yet I must record it. Because someday, someone may need to understand that containment is an illusion, that memory can be stolen, and that some things are older than humanity, patient, indifferent, eternal, and we are just the beginning.